Hello, and welcome to this educational presentation about Shays Rebellion, brought to you by yours truly, Vang Suhang. Within this presentation, the intention is to teach you about all the possible details that I have personally learned about Shays Rebellion. This is an important event that shaped the very history of America as we know it today. Without further ado, let the learning begin. Shays Rebellion, a presentation by Vang Suhang. Debt. This is a subject that everyone wishes that they did not have to deal with throughout the history of time. When the colonies were just starting to get established with their freedom from Britain, issues began to arise, the issue being money. This would soon lead to a rebellion. The rebellion would be known as Shays Rebellion, as it was led by a veteran of the Revolutionary War named Daniel Shays. At this rebellion that was formed due to the colonists' debt, violence arose. The events of Shays Rebellion happened primarily near Massachusetts, and it happened in the 1780s. This map depicts Massachusetts and the encounters between Shays followers and the government forces, and some of the attacks that Shays followers commenced. To understand why anyone would want to usher a rebellion, there needs to be a cause. For Shays Rebellion, the cause which made this uprising occur was the issue of debt that was being grown onto the colonies. More specifically were the farming colonies in West Massachusetts. The reason the debt was so growing and really struck the farmers was due to the American Revolutionary War being recently concluded. To quote Infoplease.com, debt-ridden farmers struck by the economic depression that followed the American Revolution petitioned the state senate to issue paper money and to halt foreclosure of mortgages on their property and their own imprisonment for debt as a result of high land taxes. What this entails is that farmers were being put in prison just to settle their debt, but then their foreclosure of land would still be sold while they were in prison. In this picture, in the upper left corner, you can see Daniel Shay on the horse, which is why this picture was selected, because as the leader, he was the only person in this picture that had a horse. The previous slide spoke about debt as a joking matter, but seriously, the debt occurred because of the Revolutionary War. Trading was a key feature during this time, with farmers trading resources with one another, which did not amount to much paper cash. With the American Revolution just happening, taxes were going to go up, which caused the debt, because farmers did not have paper cash due to their trading. Who took part in this rebellion primarily? Farmers. Daniel Shays, who was a farmer, but he was also the leader of the rebellion. Samuel Adams was a focal point of this rebellion, due to him being very much against the insurgents, who were also the farmers, and also government officials were involved. To quote the New England Quarterly, the wealthy and the poor, the influential and the weak, those were also individuals involved with this rebellion. Even 7 of Shays' creditors joined him in the rebellion. Featured in this photo is farmers surrounding Bostonian officials near the courthouses. As mentioned earlier, the rebellion was set within the area of Boston primarily. The Bostonians were very much trying to be peaceful in the beginning, but in August of 1786 they decided to take action, from simple large mobs to crowding the courthouses. The courts began to be blocked up by the insurgent farmers. The insurgents had soon become part of a rebellion that was known as, quote, a wicked unnatural rebellion. Pencat Williams brought this into his own writing to show how the Bostonian politicians, such as Samuel Adams, felt about the insurgents while they interrupted their courts. There were many citizens that supported the farmers, but there were some of the other fellow citizens that were agreeing with their political leaders as well. Quote, as heroes in the direct tradition of the American Revolution, while many others saw them as dangerous rebels whose actions might topple the young experiment in Republican government. This quote comes from the Gilder Ehrman Institute of American History, Advanced Placement, United States History Study Guide.
Shay and his Shayites were starting to become more and more violent. Shay himself had said this quote, march directly to Boston, plunder it, and destroy the nest of devils who by their influence to make the cart enact what they please. Burn it and lay the town of Boston in ashes. This basically ensues that Shay didn't really care about the people of Boston because they were writing the laws very wrongly and harmful to the farmers as a whole. This quote came from the source of cityjournal.org. As time progressed on, Shay and his Shayites would be more open to be more violent. As, quote, the rebellion reached its climax on January 25, 1787, when the militia intercepted and defeated Shays and nearly 150,000 regulars as they attempted to seize a federal arsenal in Springfield. This happened in Springfield, Missouri, where Shay and Shayites were attempting to grab the arsenal of guns from the Federal Reserve, the entire Federal Reserve. This quote comes from AmericanHistoryCentral.com.
This is an image of Benjamin Lincoln, who was the general who helped to end the Shays Rebellion. In January of 1787, Governor Bowdoin, who was the governor of Boston at the time, had hired his own army. He had been funded by Boston businessmen. Quote, some 4,400 men under the command of General Benjamin Lincoln were directed to put down the insurgency. This comes from History.com and its editors. This proved there was fear of the insurgency. After a battle in Springfield, Missouri, where the insurgents would be defeated, Shay and his wife would soon retreat from the location as they headed to Vermont. An attempt for a similar rebellion to occur in Vermont was tried. However, it was quickly cut off. And afterwards, the Disqualification Act was made, in which farmers and anyone involved in the rebellion would not be able to act on the court for 3 years.
The following information I got from Springfield Technical Community College, where they spoke about Shays Rebellion and how the Disqualification Act caused the aftermath. The men were barred from serving as jurors, which was spoken about earlier, and they also lost the right to vote. They also had to give up their guns and give an oath for justice of peace. Why was this event important? Shays Rebellion was said to be the last battle of the Revolutionary War, due to the fact that afterwards the Constitution was made up not far afterwards, as George Washington was brought back into the political fold. George Washington also said this quote, as he said, anarchy and confusion must prevail. I found this quote by Gilder Ehrman Institute. This event really helped shape the Constitution because the money situation was needed to be handled better. The works cited is as follows. In the first quote, I got that information about the farmers and what had happened to them being imprisoned in their debt. I found that at the first source, which talks about Shays Rebellion, which is a JSTOR source that I found. And the next source is the New England Quarterly, which is where I found the wealthy and the poor, the influential and the weak quote from History.com was the next source with its editors, as that's where I found the information about the Battle of Springfield Arsenal. Pencat Williams and his quote about Samuel Adams was the next source. Works cited continued. The next source was the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History Advanced Placement Study Guide. This is where I found information about the differences that people saw on both sides of being a rebellion member and being just a regular citizen. The final source that I wanted to use was the source of Info Please, because they had a lot of useful information.
Billion. The works cited is the images I got. Was the first image was about the farmers and them surrounding another farmer who was just fighting a Bostonian official. And the second source that I got for an image was for the map that showed where Shays Rebellion mostly happened. The third source was the one where the source where they were outside the courthouse and they were just rallying up. And the fourth source was when they were actually outside the courthouse and they were surrounding those two government officials. That's where it was primarily starting to get more violent. And the last source is Benjamin Lincoln, to show you who was controlling the army at the time that wanted to take care of them.
I really enjoyed looking at all these sources and finding out the information. That is all that I was able to gather from my educational presentation. Hope that you learned some things about Shays Rebellion and found it very interesting, and I thank you for listening.